Taking place in an alternate 1960s Britain with Tesla-like future technology, We Happy Few tells a story that feels almost like a long-lost Bioshock story. Being part adventure and part survival game, players go through 3 character vignettes in this vastly different and dark history. We Happy Few is available on August 10th for Xbox One, PS4, and PC. It's the 1960s and World War II didn't go exactly as we know it. In this alternate take on history, Germany established a second empire that occupied Britain, continuing the war throughout the rest of Europe. It's during this time that chemical experiments were done but went horribly wrong in the country, leading to the dark destruction of society's morals. It's with this in mind that the citizens of Wellington Wells decided to create a new drug, a hallucinogen called joy that helps people forget about any bad thoughts or memories, leaving them simply joyful. With their wrongdoings completely forgotten, users of joy disregard their morals and any consequences that come along with them. The drug ends up becoming so popular with dispensaries popping up throughout the city. The inhabitants of Wellington Wells, now called Wellies, force everyone to take the drug. Anyone who refuses are called downers, and those that choose to willingly not forget the past are forced out of the city into the wasteland. It's with this vastly different world that we get to play as 3 different characters, each with their own vignettes into the world through their eyes. There's Arthur, who works as a newspaper censorer in Wellington. We see him slowly realize what Wellington truly is when he decides to stop taking joy upon coming across a newspaper article about him and his brother. The second character is Sally. She's an experimental chemist that assisted in the creation of joy. Lastly, there's Ollie, a veteran soldier that rebels against the Wellington system. Refusing to take joy, though, that hasn't stopped him from getting a little bit crazy either. The 3 perspectives offer interesting takes on this alternate history and really a first-hand view at the dark, gritty dystopian past. I found the setting to be incredibly interesting, like a long-lost spin-off of a Bioshock story set on the other side of the planet. With that said, the setting was certainly the peak of my interest, with the characters being a bit less interesting. It was cool to see interactions between all 3 of the characters though. You get to learn more about each one of their backstories and how each of the characters know each other. Collectible masks around the world give you little flashbacks that reveal a bit more information about each of these characters' past, and that really seemed to be the thing I was most excited to learn about from these characters, who they were exactly right before everything went to hell. Ultimately, while We Happy Few's story has its moments of interest, I didn't really find myself as captivated by the characters' objectives or goals. Rather, I was awed by each of the characters' past, the setting, and the history of the world. Although it set out to be an action-adventure game, at its core, We Happy Few is also a survival game. The entire game is split into 3 playable characters consisting of Arthur, Sally, and Ollie. You play campaigns for each of these characters in that order, each with their own unique talents that change up the feeling of the gameplay. Arthur's talents are melee weapons. During his playthrough, you'll use an assortment of melee weapons to take on enemies, everything from a shovel to a futuristic electric umbrella. While it's certainly a useful technique, most battles are quite simple with just an attack and block combat. Luckily, there's an upgradable skill tree that can give you combat upgrades like a parry and attack boost. Sally, on the other hand, is a chemist, and so her unique ability is being able to take down enemies with her chemical creations. Ollie, on the other hand, is a veteran soldier who just can't stay away from explosives, and so naturally his unique ability is to blow people up. All 3 of these characters provide different perspectives from the same timeline and even cross paths a few times, occasionally showing the same scene or moment from different viewpoints. Gameplay has you traditionally exploring sandbox areas in the forms of towns, completing objectives to continue on with your character's story. I noticed early on a trend with the structure of how the objectives were designed. Usually this would be going to a specific acquaintance and seek of help, only to get told, yeah, I'll help you, but do this first. Story objectives quickly became fetch quests essentially, retrieving one item in exchange for another item. Luckily, the types of items you go after and the means you go about either finding or crafting those requests help keep the objectives feel not so repetitive. You also earn skill points by completing these objectives. These points can then be used to branch out your skill tree for better combat health and stealth. Outside of the main story objectives, you'll come across side quests from people around town. These can be anything from helping someone clean up a waste dump, saving someone from downers, and helping a sick man get some medicine. They're nice distractions from the main 20+ hour story that could net you some pretty useful tools. Speaking of which, you'll spend a lot of time crafting, gathering items, and building up your character. A lot of it is in part due to the survival mechanics in We Happy Few. Throughout the game, you have to maintain things like hunger, thirst, health, and sleep, just to name a few. This means finding food, drinks, a bed to sleep on, and so on. Sometimes these things won't be readily available, and so you'll have to resort to rotten food at the cost of hurting other elements of survival. In addition to general surviving, you need to keep up your appearance of joy. In towns like Wellington, where it's mandatory to be on joy, cops and citizens will come after you the moment you show symptoms of not taking your joy. Your joy status is shown at the top left of the screen with the little meter. Luckily, there are stations around the town where you can get more joy, but you can also overdose on it, leaving you with nightmare visions. Now, throughout my time playing We Happy Few, I noticed that there was this general sense of unpolished gameplay. Knocking out enemies caused them to spasm out on the ground like if I was playing a buggy Bethesda game. Talking to NPCs on benches often made them literally just float away. While in mid-combat against a group of enemies, they'd occasionally teleport right behind me, causing for some frustrating deaths from a pretty bare bones to begin with combat system. I even somehow managed to skip an objective that required me to wear a broiler suit to get past the guard by simply just beating up the guard and hiding away from an angry mob for a few minutes. The list goes on and on, but to wrap it up, We Happy Few is just straight up a buggy game. The structure and the design of the gameplay fluctuates between decent and good, but gets blemished heavily by the buggy nature of the game. We Happy Few's setting completely captivated and immersed me in an alternate 1960s Britain with futuristic Tesla tech. The architecture of buildings down to the in-home design of everything made me feel like I was really in this alternate take on history. However, there were definitely moments that completely broke that immersion. NPCs walking around Wellington look completely fitting until you realize they're cloned and spread throughout every corner of the procedurally generated town. The world overall is pretty darn buggy too. Knocking out characters sends them into a spasm, making the game feel like a purposely humorous physics simulator. Other bugs included just having a character float away while talking to them, and NPCs breaking through in-game objects like benches. Some animations displayed at the wrong time as well, like opening a lock despite being behind the chest and just teleporting to the front when I wanted to open the lock. While the world was well constructed from a visual standpoint, the overall bugginess of the gameplay definitely helped tarnish that admiration.
Took this to the bridge at Maidenholm, and supposing you told the bobbies you were there to fix the bridge works, it might enhance your credibility.
What have you been up to? No one's seen you for hours.
Nose to the grindstone, you know.
Then why haven't I heard a single whoosh through the door since 10 o'clock?
All right.
Did you see the Pipers match?
We Happy Few's soundtrack was a mix of joy and uneasiness. When on joy and just inside one of the Wellington government facilities, music would be happy and peppy. And what I can only describe as way too uplifting elevator music, the collection of happier toned songs felt like I was in an infomercial on TV, just looping the same old cheerful tunes over and over again. On the other side of the game though, there are moments where you're not on joy or having a downer moment. It's in these situations where the really off-putting eerie tracks come into play, and they certainly work well. The atmosphere doesn't just change visually, but emotionally, it feels different thanks to the music. I would go as far as to say that the more dark-toned songs fit the game more than the moments of joy. In the situations when the joy songs did play, it felt fake in a way, and I guess ultimately that's the most fitting feeling to have when you're taking the joy drug. As for the voice acting, they were alright. I wasn't blown away by the performances here. Arthur, Sally, and Ollie's characters were of course the standouts, with Arthur being the one that I resonated the most with. He's a character that constantly talked to himself, always critiquing his actions, and it was really believable. What wasn't though was the voice acting for the NPC characters in the cities that felt completely phoned in. Ultimately, We Happy Few was an interesting adventure and a truly fascinating take on history. The world of Wellington Wells and the overall plot of this backdrop captivated me and got me excited to learn more about it. The characters, though not as interesting as the setting, were still a great perspective to play as in this dystopian past. The structure of the gameplay has certainly seen a lot of improvement since the days of We Happy Few's early access. Having each of the characters have a different type of playstyle made each of the playthroughs feel distinct, despite having numerous crosses between the different playable characters and perspectives. The survival mechanics certainly kept things feeling challenging as well, something I had to keep an eye on while clearing out my objectives. It's not all sunshine and rainbows on this joy pill though. There was a lot of repetition in objectives, with pretty much most of them being fetch quests of, I'll help you out but you have to get me this first, over and over and over again. The gameplay overall also had this layer of bugginess to it that just felt consistent throughout the entire game. In the end, We Happy Few was an intriguing deep dive into a crazy world of alternate history, but one that could use a bit more polish in design and more varying mission structure. Despite already getting delayed for some restructuring, the gameplay didn't feel fully baked. Maybe if I was on some joy, I could look past those faults. If I had to give it a score right now though, I'd give it a 7 out of 10. That does it for my review of We Happy Few for the PC, Xbox One, and PS4. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more reviews just like this every single week, and you can check out my most recent videos on the left side of the screen. Thank you all very much for watching, hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you all in the next one.